should watch this at night. Hey curious cats, my name is Sahara. Welcome to that true crime channel. Let's get into it. For tonight's case, we're going to Africa and more specifically Morocco. This is a very tragic story. I should not be dancing. Abdelali Amer was born in 1961 in a middle-class family. For some reason, he never goes to school. When he's a teenager, both his parents pass away and he lives with one of his older sisters. At age 20, he enrolls in the army, but he's revoked for being too violent. Almost immediately, he doesn't last too long as a military man. Soon he falls into addiction, drugs, and alcohol, and he then starts to get in trouble with the law. It begins with theft and assault, and it escalates to rape and even abduction. The first time he goes to prison is for rape, and he's 23 years old. His brothers and sisters, they slowly distance themselves from him because of his violent behavior and him being in and out of prison. Most of them eventually move to Europe. Only his older sister, the one he lives with, stays in Morocco, and she takes care of him. She's the only one who cares about him. At some point, he also wanted to immigrate to Europe, but because he has a criminal record, his request for a visa is denied. His last incarceration before the events we're going to talk about was for raping an old woman. He comes out of prison, he's 44 years old, and he finds out that the family house was sold and he didn't get his share. His siblings split the money amongst themselves and they left absolutely nothing for him. On top of that, the only person he could count on, his oldest sister, she passes away. He ends up on the streets, he is homeless, he's isolated and alone, and that's when he starts to develop a deep hatred towards society, and particularly his siblings who abandoned him and don't care about him at all. To be able to afford his wine and drugs, he finds other homeless people and robs them of what little they have. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's drugs. That's when he goes from rapist to killer. His first victim is found on the riverbanks in a deserted town located a couple hours away from the capital city, Rabat, in October 2004. Male, adult, a couple wine bottles are found by his side, and the cause of death is determined to have been head trauma. The police, they assume it was an accident. He probably was too drunk, he fell on his head and just died. Now there's something important that I should mention here. According to my research on the matter of autopsy, you should know that in Muslim countries it's not systematically performed. The dignity of the deceased is preserved as much as possible. If police work establishes the cause of death as accidental, there is no need to proceed with an autopsy. It is an obligation to do it, however, if the cause of death is believed or suspected to have been murder. I guess what I'm trying to say, because obviously it's the same thing in European countries, an autopsy is not systematic, but in Muslim countries, I'd say they try to avoid it as much as possible. And there are many reasons for that. One of them being that according to Islamic tradition, you have to bury the body of the deceased as soon as possible. An autopsy would obviously delay burial. If you can avoid playing around with the corpse, you should. Not to mention that these are homeless people we're talking about. Just like in any other country, sadly, nobody would advocate for them if there's a doubt over the cause of death, and they're soon forgotten. Going back to the first victim, the case is closed very quickly after police concludes it's an accidental death. But bodies start to pile up, and nobody in the police force sees the link between what is now a total of 13 victims. They were all killed in the span of 10 months. The coincidence of them being all outcasts, robbed of everything they have, dying from a head trauma, and being found in the same type of location, meaning around the capital city, and always in a deserted and secluded area, still doesn't lead detectives to think maybe someone is behind this. Corpse after corpse, they keep closing these cases as accidental deaths. The word murder is not even brought up at all. On victim number 14 is when everything changes. The theory of voluntary manslaughter is finally brought up. It's the month of July 2005. Another dead body is found, again on the riverbanks, homeless man, robbed of everything, head trauma, wine bottles littering the floor. But this time, a detail will allow police to rule out an accident. The head injury that led to the death of this poor man is facing the sky, so it could not have been an accident. It couldn't be more obvious that the head was smashed in by someone, obviously. What I found to be astounding is that most people living in the area believed that all these deaths were definitely not accidents. They all knew it was some psycho doing this. They even nicknamed him Bouhajra or Boussemma, meaning the stone killer. They even guessed he killed his victims with stones and rocks. Better job than the police. In the neighborhood, they all knew Abdelali, but they never suspected he could be behind all this. Those who would testify later said that they would see him wandering around, looking for food and probably also drugs and alcohol, because he often appeared to be under the influence. But he seemed harmless, just another homeless person wandering around, not hurting anybody, not doing anything wrong. There were 4 people, again homeless, who actually were able to escape the killer, but they never filed a complaint. I guess they probably think it wouldn't do them any good. So they probably told people around them, and maybe that's one of the reasons the inhabitants in the area, they knew that these deaths were not accidents. After the 14th victim is found, the cases are all reopened, and 2 witnesses come forward and they give police a very detailed physical description of the killer. They were sort of friends with him. They would sometimes hang out together on the riverbanks, and they saw him kill his last victim. They actually get arrested for what we call in French law failure to assist a person in danger. Apparently, it's not considered a criminal offense in some parts of the world, like Britain and the USA, but it is in France and also in some African countries. In France, if you're found guilty of not helping someone in danger, you can be sentenced to a maximum of 5 years in prison and a 75,000 euro fine. In Morocco, the sentence would be 3 to 5 years in prison. So if you're in France or Morocco and you see someone in danger, go help or go to prison. I couldn't find the info as to how long these witnesses remained in prison, but I know for sure that they were incarcerated after they testified. Police starts to look for Abdelali. They establish a perimeter around the capital, and they particularly target secluded areas where he was known to hang out and also where he would commit his crimes. Abdelali is found after only 8 days of search. On August 9th is when he is arrested. He immediately admits to police that he is the perpetrator of all 14 murders. He takes investigators to all crime scenes and gives details as to how he killed them. He remembers every single one of them, the exact spot, the circumstances. He gives horrifying details to police. They're astounded that he remembers so much. Even the position of his victims upon death, especially considering that when he killed, he usually was either very drunk or high on drugs. He cooperates with police, and all the information he gives is definitely a fact that confirms that he's the one that's done it. Sometimes he'd wait for the unsuspecting victims to fall asleep and smash their heads with a rock or stone. At times he'd put the stone in a sock. I don't really know why. I guess the locations he picked were also convenient for that. There were a lot of rocks and stones lying around. He explains that he was robbing his victims to buy himself some wine because he wanted to drink in order to forget his problems. He says he hates the world, he hates society, but most of all he hates his siblings for leaving him behind, not caring for him at all, and he even said he would have killed them too had they been around, had they been in Morocco. Some people speculated that in spite of being an alcoholic and a drug addict, Abdelali was actually smart enough to turn his victims' heads so the injury would face the floor, hopefully directing police theories towards an accident rather than murder. He also knows that his targets are not society's main concern. As I said earlier, sadly, nobody's gonna advocate for outcasts, so he chooses his victims wisely. Abdelali Amer is the second most notorious serial killer in Morocco. A few months after his arrest, he is sentenced to death on November 28th, 2005. I actually don't know if he was executed. I found no information about that. You should know that in Morocco, the king has to sign an executive order for death sentencing to be performed. And the last one the king did sign was in 1993. This last person to be sentenced to death by a court of law in Morocco was actually a police officer who had been found guilty of raping over 500 women, probably abusing his position as police officer. I know it's not the subject of this video, but I have to tell you how this guy was brought to justice. Or maybe I should cover this case in a future video. No, I really want to tell you. So what he did was he would rent an apartment or sometimes a hotel room. He'd place his filming devices and he would film himself every time he raped his victims. Later, he would sell the tapes on the black market. An Italian citizen, originally from Morocco, bought one of the tapes. This is so insane. Can you guess? He buys one of the many tapes made by this guy, only to realize that one of the rape victims in the video is none other than his sister. He flies straight to Morocco, obviously, to help her. He files a complaint, but it's buried by Moroccan authorities. And it's not just because it's Morocco. I mean, anywhere in the world, you can't touch police officers. He was able, however, to file a complaint when he went back to Italy through the embassy. That's how he got caught. I mean, the guy was dumb enough to record over 100 tapes and sell them. And obviously you can see his face. To get back to our subject, unless the king signs the order, apparently since 1993, a death sentence in Morocco really means life in prison. So I'm assuming Abdelali is still on death row at the prison of Kenitra, a prison known for its very rough living conditions. In the Arab world, Kenitra comes forth in the ranking of worst prisons. I mean, in comparison, French prisons are like a trip to Disneyland. This is actually the end of the story of Abdelali Amer. Obviously, a lot of unanswered questions in this case. I knew I wasn't going to find enough material, or at least not as much as I would have wanted, but I was asking myself why. Why is it so difficult to find information on homicides in Africa? So we're getting to the second part of the video, and I kind of wanted to answer my own question. And think about it for a second. Why do you think there isn't much information online? Let's start with the theories I had before I even started doing any research on the subject. My first theory was that forensics are not as advanced, police work in general, I would say. So I'm pretty sure a lot of cases are closed as accidental deaths when really they were a homicide. My second and very obvious theory is that data is not as accessible as it would be here in France, for example. Record keeping is not accurate, sometimes even non-existent. More specific to this case, the killer and the victims were homeless, so there's even less documentation. I found much more material about the rapist I mentioned, for example, the police officer. And my last theory is that it could be because of lack of interest of people in homicide in general. It could be linked to religion. I spoke to a friend about the theories that she would have, and she kind of agrees with me on most of them. She also specified that in these parts of the world, people are preoccupied by essential things, bare necessities. So many people worry about being even able to eat. And in comparison, in European countries, I mean, we do have people in similar situations, but this represents such a small percentage of the population. So I guess we have the luxury of time to be interested in true crime. Side note, but I told my friend that I was making a video about a serial killer in Africa. She's also from an African background, and she said, "Oh, we have those?" I said, "Of course, they're everywhere in the world." And she says, "Oh, I thought they were all in the USA." I mean, she's not completely wrong. I want to give you the numbers I found. The article where I found the information is from 2018, so the numbers might be a little different today, but it's still pretty accurate. The award for country with the most serial killers in the history of mankind goes to the USA. 2,743. Fun fact, most of them are white. Do with that info what you will. Now let's talk about who's next in the ranking, because it's shockingly low in comparison. Can you guess what country it is? It's England with 145. 2,743, 145. Like at this point, it's not gold medal, it's... Third comes South Africa with 112. After that, Canada, Italy, and Japan. I never thought Japan would crack the top 10. Let's get back to my theories. After a lot of digging, I found some answers, mainly in a study by the United Nations on global homicides published in 2019. So are my theories confirmed? Concerning data, yes. The study specifies that some countries don't even have the resources to collect data. Check out this map. This is an assessment of the quality of collected data per country. The dark brown areas are high quality and the gray ones, well, the chart simply says no score. I'm not sure if that means not enough to assess of the quality or no data at all. And for that period, the study was for the year 2017, published in 2019. The Arab Spring disrupted data gathering. So even for countries that do have the resources, or at least better resources than others, you have to consider such events that would interfere with statistics. By deduction to this first answer, my other theories are also confirmed. Not enough resources for forensics, for police in general, and even less, as well as little to no documentation when we're dealing with homeless people. Now, if you're interested, I found some elements in this study that I want to share, mainly because I found some of them to be really surprising. I mean, some I already knew, but not to that extent. For example, I think we all know that men kill more than women, and they call us crazy, but the numbers are still shocking. 90% of homicides are perpetrated by men when only 10% are perpetrated by women. Men are not only the perpetrators 90% of the time, they're also the victims 81% of the time. But, and this is a big but, no pun intended, this rate varies from country to country. For example, in some Asian countries like Japan and Korea, and even in some European countries, the percentage of female victims is much higher. Japan and Korea, I never would have thought. Other fun fact, actually not fun at all, in the case of a murder carried out by a spouse, partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, 82% of the time a woman is the victim. In only 18% of the cases, it's the other way around. It's the woman killing her male partner. I guess I knew that, but reading it makes it worse somehow. Other interesting fact, can you guess the percentage of people who kill under the influence? The answer, 37%. I mean, obviously this rate is global. I'm sure it's higher or lower in certain parts of the world, but I still think 37% is quite a lot. And I can't help but wonder, would these people have killed had they not been under the influence? As you can imagine, the highest homicide rate is found where? In the Americas. We're talking the entire continent. 37% of all homicides. Closely followed by Africa, 35%. That really isn't fair. I expected the difference between the two to be bigger. Population-wise, yes, they're similar. 1 billion inhabitants in America and 1.2 in Africa. But the study takes into consideration homicides from armed conflicts. If it didn't, the difference would be bigger, I believe. However, they mentioned something that they call the rule of law. Basically, what it means is that, sorry, I have to read this part. Nations that fail to establish strong security and justice systems are more likely to suffer spirals of chronic violence and insecurity. It doesn't necessarily mean murder, so I still think I'm right. If you put aside political conflicts, I'm sure the homicide rate in the Americas is higher than in Africa. What do you think? To end this video on a positive note, you should know that globally the number of homicide victims is higher, but simply because the population is growing. The rate, and that's what matters more, the rate is going down. Silver lining. That was a very interesting video to make. Before I leave you to your nightmares, please give me a few seconds for the random item review. I should have a theme song for this. I'll work on that. Can you see it? Bourbon, strawberry, and vanilla. This is a body spray by the brand Bath & Body Works. I'm obsessed with this brand. I should show you my bathroom so you realize how deep this obsession is. I have a problem. I have an issue. I just love smelling good. And don't believe what people say. French people take showers every day. These are actually super cheap when you buy them in the US. There's only 2 stores in Europe, one in Milan and one in Warsaw. When I was a flight attendant, every time I would go there, I would buy stuff. Obviously, when I went to the US and Canada, and I went there a lot, thankfully, that's how I got this amazing collection. I would just go to the stores and just, purchase body sprays and candles, and it's also a great idea for a gift. Bath & Body Works, I am begging you, please open a store in Paris. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you want to support the channel, please like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think. Let me know what other cases you would want me to cover in the future. And as usual, I'll see you soon. Bye.